The cargo ship Wanderer groaned as it cut through the atmosphere of XK-99, its hull plates screaming against the wind. Myron gripped the controls with calloused hands, watching the gray wasteland spread beneath him like a cancer. Ash clouds swirled across dead plains, and the scanner showed nothing but emptiness. Perfect. Nobody came here anymore, which meant whatever wreckage lay buried in this forsaken dust belonged to whoever was desperate enough to claim it. Mayan was that desperate. The syndicate wanted their money in 3 weeks or they'd take his ship. The Wanderer was all he had left. The landing struts crunched into volcanic sand, sending up plumes of gray powder that coated the viewports. Myron sealed his environment suit, checked the oxygen levels twice, and descended the ramp into hell. The wind hit him immediately, a constant howl that never stopped, never changed pitch. It had been screaming across this planet for centuries, wearing down mountains into dust. His handheld scanner chirped as he walked, picking up trace metals, old fuel signatures, the usual junk. Then something different, a pulse, rhythmic, faint. His heart quickened. Despite himself, energy signatures meant technology, and technology meant salvage worth selling. He followed the beacon across a field of jagged rocks, their edges sharp enough to tear through his suit if he wasn't careful. The wreckage rose from the sand like the skeleton of some massive beast. A transport liner. Myron realized one of the old colony ships from before the war. Half of it was buried, but the exposed sections showed signs of a catastrophic landing. Hull breaches gaped like wounds, and the entire forward section had been sheared away. This thing had been here for years, maybe decades. The beacon led him to a sealed compartment near what had been the passenger section. My pulled out his plasma cutter and went to work on the door. The metal resisted, then surrendered with a shower of sparks. He kicked the door open and raised his flashlight. What he saw made him freeze. The compartment was small, maybe 4 m across, but someone had turned it into a home. Blankets salvaged from seats covered the floor. Empty ration packs were stacked neatly in one corner. A child's drawing hung on the wall, held up by strips of wire, and behind a barricade of cargo crates, 2 enormous eyes stared at him from the darkness. My lowered his weapon slowly. The eyes blinked. A small figure emerged into the light, clutching something to her chest. A girl, maybe 10 years old by human standards, though her pale violet skin and the small ridges along her cheekbones marked her as non-human. Her clothes were too big, patched and repatched with scraps of different materials. In her arms she held a doll made from wires and torn fabric. "Please don't hurt me," she whispered in broken galactic common. Myron unsealed his helmet, pulling it off despite the stale air. The girl needed to see his face, needed to know he wasn't a threat. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said softly. "What's your name?" "Normasa." Her voice was small, fragile. "Are you from the rescue ships?" "What rescue ships, kid?" "The ones my parents called for." She pointed to a viewport, its glass cracked but still intact. "They went to the Blue Cliffs to fix the antenna. They said to wait here. They said they'd come back with help." Myron felt something cold settle in his stomach. He looked around the compartment again, seeing it differently. Now, the tick marks on the wall, thousands of them, scratched into the metal with a piece of sharp plastic. Days. She'd been counting days. How long ago did they leave? Normasa thought about it, her small face scrunching up. A long time. I stopped counting after. The lines filled the whole wall. She smiled and it broke his heart, but they'll come back, they promised. Myron stood there, a grown man who'd seen friends die in bar fights and partners betray him for credits, and he wanted to cry. Instead, he knelt down to her level. I need to go check the antenna. Okay, you stay here where it's safe. I'll be back soon. Will you bring them back with you? I'll do my best, kid. The blue cliffs were 3 km from the wreck. Ridge of azure stone that rose from the dead plains like the spine of some berry giant. Myron's suit beeped warnings at him. As he climbed, the radiation levels spiking near the summit, he found the antenna array first, a twisted mass of metal that would never send a signal again. Then he found them, 2 bodies, half buried in the sand at the base of the cliffs. Their suits were intact, but the helmets were cracked, oxygen tanks empty. One of them had been reaching toward the other when they died. Myron checked their identification tags. Dr. Kalen and Dr. Shira, xenobiologists from the Andromeda Station, Norma's parents. He took the tags, cleaned them on his suit, and stared at them for a long moment. Then he looked back toward the wreck where a little girl was waiting, still believing in promises that would never be kept. As Myron turned to leave, his motion detector chirped. Something was moving. He spun around, hand on his blaster, scanning the cliffs. The wind howled, carrying ash and sand, but there was something else, a rhythmic clicking sound like claws on stone. Then he saw them, creatures emerging from crevices in the blue rock. They were the color of the cliffs themselves, camouflaged perfectly until they moved, 4-legged, maybe a meter tall at the shoulder, with elongated heads and rows of crystalline teeth that gleamed in the gray light. Their eyes were pale and milky, adapted to the dark, blind maybe, or nearly so. But their heads swiveled toward him with predatory focus. 6 of them, no, 8. More were coming. Myron backed away, slowly, not wanting to trigger a chase response. The creatures spread out, flanking him, pack hunters smart. His scanner showed elevated body temperatures, fast metabolisms. They'd been hibernating in the cliffs, conserving energy in this dead world. The parents must have disturbed them 3 years ago. That's why they never made it back to the ship. One of the creatures lunged. Myron fired his blaster, the bolt catching at mid-leap. The creature shrieked and tumbled, but the others didn't flee. They attacked as one coordinated assault that spoke of countless hunts in the dark. Myron, his suit wasn't made for sprinting, but fear gave him speed. The creatures were faster. He could hear them behind him, their claws scraping stone, their clicking growing louder. He fired blind, over his shoulder, not aiming, just trying to slow them down. One yelped. Another kept coming. The terrain grew rougher. Myron stumbled over rocks, caught himself, kept moving. His oxygen gauge was dropping faster than it should. The exertion, the fear. He had maybe 20 minutes of air left, and the ship was 3 km away. He'd never make it. Running, he needed to think. A shallow ravine cut across his path. Myron jumped down, landing hard on volcanic glass that cracked under his weight. The creatures followed, leaping down with practiced ease, but the ravine narrowed. Ahead, the walls closing in, perfect bottleneck. My squeezed through a gap, barely wide enough for his suit, and kept running. The creatures tried to follow. The first one got stuck, its shoulders too wide. It thrashed and screamed. Others tried to push past it, creating a writhing mass of blue-gray flesh and snapping jaws. Myron kept running, putting distance between them, but he knew they'd find another way. This was their world. They knew every crack and crevice. He had to get to the ship. Before they caught up, his legs burned. His lungs ocked. The suit's cooling system couldn't keep up with his body. Heat, sweat poured down his face, stinging his eyes. The wreck appeared in the distance, a dark silhouette against gray sky. He could see the Wanderer. Beyond it, his beautiful battered ship. Safety, home. The clicking returned. They'd found a way around. My didn't look back. He just ran, pushing his body beyond what it should be capable of. The wreck grew larger, 200 m 150. He could see the hole he'd cut in the door. Could see movement inside. Normasa waiting for him. A creature burst from behind a piece of wreckage, cutting him off from the entrance. Myron skidded to a stop, bringing his blaster up. The creature's milky eyes focused on him. Its jaws opened, showing layer after layer of teeth. It crouched, ready to spring. Myron fired. The bolt hit it square in the chest, but the creature's hide was thick. It stumbled but didn't fall. Myron fired again and again. Third shot finally dropped it, but two more were coming from his right. He backed toward the wreck's entrance, firing. As he moved, my enormous voice, small and scared, came from inside. Stay inside, don't come out. But she appeared in the doorway anyway, her small face pale with fear. She saw the creatures and screamed. The sound seemed to enrage them. They charged. Mayan grabbed a piece of metal debris, a jagged shard as long as his arm, and swung it like a club. It connected with the first creature's head, sending it sprawling. The second one latched onto his arm, its teeth grinding against his suit's protective plating. The suit held, but alarm screamed in his helmet. Hole breach imminent. The creature was stronger than it looked, twisting its head, trying to tear through. Myron jammed the metal shard into its side, pushing with all his strength. The creature released him and fell away, but three more were coming. Run, kid, get to my ship, run. But Normasa didn't run. She picked up a rock and threw it at the nearest creature. The rock bounced off its hide harmlessly, but it distracted the thing long enough for me to grab her and dive through the entrance into the wreck. He sealed the door behind them, jamming a piece of debris against it. Creatures slammed into the door seconds later. The metal groaned. They were strong, too strong. The door wouldn't hold long. We need to go out the other side. Myron gasped, his oxygen gauge flashing red. There's a breach in the hull near the cargo section. We can climb through and run for the ship. Normasa nodded, clutching her wire doll. They ran through the corridors of the dead ship, the sound of the creatures battering the door echoing behind them. Mayan found the hull breach, a ragged tear in the metal that opened onto the ash planes. They squeezed through and ran. The Wanderer's ramp was down. Mayan had left it that way, trusting in the planet's emptiness. Now it was a lifeline. They sprinted across the open ground, and Myron could hear the creatures behind them, having found another way in. The clicking was everywhere surrounding them. They reached the ramp and climbed. Mayan hit the controls, and the ramp began to rise. A creature leaped, its claws scraping metal, trying to pull itself up. Mayan kicked it in its eyeless face, and it fell away. The ramp sealed. Inside the ship, Myron collapsed against the wall, gasping. His oxygen gauge showed 3 Minutes remaining, he'd cut it too. Close, way too close, Normasa threw herself at him, crying, and he held her. With shaking hands, "It's okay," he wheezed. "We're safe now, those things. They almost got you, but they didn't. I'm here, I'm okay." He pulled off his helmet, breathing the ship's recycled air like it was paradise. "Kid, I need you to do me a favor. Don't tell the others about this, about the creatures. They're already upset about you being here. If they know this planet is dangerous, it'll just make things worse." Normasa nodded, wiping her eyes. "I won't tell, good girl." He stood, his legs still shaking, and looked out the viewport. The creatures circled the ship, their eyeless faces turned upward. They knew food was inside. They'd wait. I went to the cockpit and fired up the engines. Time to leave this hell behind. As the Wanderer lifted off, the creatures scattered, disappearing into the ash. Myron watched them go, thinking about Normasa's parents. They'd been running from genetic researchers, only to die at the jaws of blind predators on a dead world. Life was cruel that way. Random and brutal and unfair, but at least he'd saved their daughter. At least he'd done that much. When he returned, Normasa jumped up with hope blazing in her eyes. "Did you see them? Are they coming?" I couldn't tell her. "Not yet, not like this." So he lied, hating himself for it. "They asked me to take you to the station. We'll meet them there. They're very busy fixing things, but they'll catch up soon." Norm's face lit up. "Really? We're going to see them?" "Yeah, kid, really." She gathered her few possessions into a small pack, chattering about how she couldn't wait to show her parents all the things she'd drawn while waiting. Mayan carried her back to the Wanderer through the screaming wind, and she wrapped her small arms around his neck, trusting him completely. The cargo bay door hissed open, and Mario was waiting, arms crossed over her chest. The navigator was a hard woman, all sharp angles and sharper words. She'd been with Myron for 2 years, and in that time he'd never seen her smile. She took one look at Normasa, and her face went red. "Are you out of your mind?" Mariel's voice echoed off the metal walls. "We don't have fuel to spare for joy rides, and you bring back a kid. What are you going to do with her?" "Mayan, feed her our rations. Use our oxygen. She has nowhere else to go." "That's not our problem." Mariel stepped forward, jabbing a finger at his chest. "We're scavengers, not a charity. Every mouth we feed is credits out of our pockets. Turn this ship around and drop her back where you found her." Norma pressed against Myron's leg, making herself small. He put a protective hand on her shoulder. "This is my ship, Mariel. I'm the captain." "She stays." "Then you're a fool, and we're all going to starve because of your bleeding heart. Meeting's over. Get us clear of this rock." Mariel's jaw worked like she wanted to say more, but she turned on her heel and stormed toward the cockpit. I felt Normasa trembling and knelt down beside her. "Don't worry about her. She's just grumpy. Let's get you something to eat, okay?" But the tension on the ship only grew worse over the following days. Mariel stopped speaking to Myron except when absolutely necessary. Nomi watched Normasa with calculating eyes that made Myron's skin crawl. Only Nishalit showed any kindness to the girl, though even she was careful to keep her distance when the others were around. On the third day, things came to a head. Mayan was teaching Normasa how to use the waste recycler properly when Mariel burst into the room, her face red with fury. "We need to talk now. Captain's quarters." Myron followed her, leaving Normasa with Nishalit. In his quarters he found not just Mariel but also Nomis and two other crew members he'd almost forgotten about. Carl, the cargo master, a silent bulk of a man who'd been sleeping off a drinking binge since before they reached XK-99. And Ihor, the weapons tech, young and scared and always following whoever seemed strongest. Mariel crossed her arms. We took a vote, 4-2. The girl goes, "This isn't a democracy. I'm the captain. You're a fool playing house with someone else's kid." Mariel stepped forward. "You know what I found out? I did some digging into old manifest. That ship on XK-99 wasn't just any transport. It was registered to Helix Dynamics. The girl isn't just some random orphan. She's valuable, and you're sitting on a fortune while we're scraping by." Myron's blood ran cold. "How did you know me is good at finding things people want hidden?" Clear's throat. She smiled, and it was ugly. "Helix Dynamics is offering a reward, 2 million credits for information leading to the recovery of their property." That's what she is, Mayan property, and we're entitled to that reward. She's a child. She's a paycheck. Carl spoke for the first time, his voice like gravel. "We're broke, Captain. The syndicate wants their money. We got no options left." "There's always an option that doesn't involve selling a kid." Nomis leaned against the wall, his expression smug. "We checked the legal documents. Helix Dynamics has full custody rights. Her parents signed them over when they took the research position. Everything's legal. We'd just be returning lost property to its rightful owners." Her parents ran because Helix Dynamics wanted to cut her open and study her like a lab rat. "Not our problem," Mariel said. "We need that money, all of us." Even Nishalit agrees, though she's too soft to say it to your face. I looked at each of them in turn. Carl wouldn't meet his eyes. Ihor looked at the floor. Nomis just smiled, and Mariel stared him down with the cold certainty of someone who'd already made up their mind. "No," Myron said quietly. "What?" I said. "No. She stays. And if anyone on this ship tries to hand her over to Helix Dynamics or anyone else, I'll space them myself." Mariel laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You and what leverage? We outnumber you 4-2. We can take the ship anytime we want. Try it." The room went silent. Mayan's hand rested on the blaster at his hip. He saw Mariel. Saw her eyes narrow. For a long moment nobody moved. Then Ihor broke the tension. "Maybe we should wait, think about this. I mean, she's just a kid. Do we really want to shut up Ihor?" Mariel didn't take her eyes off Mayan. "This is between me and the captain." "There's nothing between us," Mayan said. "I gave you an order. The girl stays. If you don't like it, you can leave at the next station. Until then, you follow my commands or you're off the ship." Carl stirred. "You can't kick us all off. You need a crew. I'll manage. You'll die." Nomi said softly. "The syndicate will find you. They'll take your ship. And then where will you be? Where will the precious little girl be?" Myron felt the trap closing around him. They were right. He needed the crew. He needed their skills, but he also needed to protect Normasa. He couldn't do both. "Not anymore. Get out," he said quietly. "All of you, I need to think." They left. But Mariel paused at the door. "You've got until we reach the next station to decide, the girl or the ship. You can't have both." When they were gone, Myron sat on his bunk and put his head in his hands. He'd been in tight spots before, But nothing like this. Nothing where the stakes were so high and the options so limited. He could fight them, but that might get someone killed. He could give in, but that would mean handing Normasa over to people who treat her like specimen. Or he could run, but where would he go with no crew and a ship that barely held together? A small knock at the door. Normasa peeked in, her face worried. Mayan, are you okay? He forced a smile. I'm fine, kid, just tired. She climbed up onto the bunk next to him, her small body warm against his side. They want to get rid of me, don't they? I heard them yelling. It's complicated. It's because I'm different, because of what I am. She looked at her hands, turning them over like she could see the nanoparticles in her cells. My parents used to say I was special. But special just means people want things from you. That's not true. Yes, it is. You're the first person who wanted me just because I'm me, not because of what's in my blood or what I can do. Just me. Mayan pulled her close, and that's not going to change. I promise you, kid. Whatever happens, I'm not letting anyone take you, even if it means losing everything. Especially then. She was quiet for a moment, then in a small voice, what if I leave? What if I just go? Then everyone would be happy. You'd have your ship. They'd have their money. And no, my turned her to face him. Don't ever think like that. You're not a problem to be solved. Your family and family doesn't give up on each other. Norma's eyes filled with tears. She threw her arms around his neck and held on tight. I don't want to leave. I don't want to be alone again. You won't be, I swear it. But even as he made the promise, Mayan knew he was running out of time. He needed a plan, and he needed it fast. He set her up in his own quarters, stringing a hammock from the support beams because his bunk was too high for her to climb into safely. The ship's galley had ration packs that could be heated, and Normasa ate like she was starving, which she probably was. Between bites she asked questions. How fast could the ship go? How many stars had he visited? Did he think her parents would like the picture she'd drawn? My answered as best he could, his throat tight. When she finally fell asleep in the hammock, clutching her wire doll, he sat at his desk and stared at the identification tags. He should have told her. Every moment he waited made it worse, but when he thought about crushing that hope in her eyes, he couldn't do it. The days aboard the Wanderer fell into an uneasy rhythm. Norma's awoke early, exploring every corner of the ship with childlike curiosity. She discovered the cargo bay with its massive loading doors, the engineering deck where machines hummed and glowed, the observation bubble. You could see stars without the distortion of viewports. Each discovery delighted her, and she'd run to find Myron to share it, but the crew's hostility never faded. Mariel refused to speak to her directly, addressing all comments about the girl to Myron as if Normasa wasn't even there. Your passenger ate the last of the chocolate rations, she'd say coldly. Or your passenger left the water running in the head again. We're not made of resources. Carl ignored her completely, walking past like she was invisible. Ehorat least tried to be polite, but he was young and easily swayed by the others. Only Nicolette showed genuine kindness, and even then carefully when no one else was watching. Normasa felt it all. Myron could see it in how she made herself small when the crew was around, how she apologized for taking up space, how she ate less than she needed to avoid being a burden. It broke his heart. She'd Survived 3 years alone on a dead planet. And now she was being punished for surviving. One morning Myron found her in the cargo bay, tucked between two crates, crying silently. He sat down beside her, his large frame folding awkwardly in the small space. They hate me, she whispered. They don't hate you. They're just scared. Scared of what? I'm just a kid, scared of change, scared of responsibility, scared of caring about someone and losing them. He put his arm around her small shoulders. But I'm not scared, and I'm not going anywhere. Promise, promise. She leaned against him, and they sat there in the dim cargo bay for a long time, just being quiet together. Mayan thought about his own daughter, dead now for 5 years. She would have been about Norma's age, would have had that same curiosity, that same need to be loved and protected. He'd failed his daughter. He wouldn't fail Normasa. That evening Myron called a crew meeting in the galley. Everyone came, reluctantly taking seats around the table with crossed arms and hostile expressions. Normasa started to follow, but Myron had her weight in his quarters. This needed to be between him and the crew. We need to clear the air, he began. About what? Mary asked coldly. About how you've turned us into babysitters, about how you're risking all our lives for a kid that isn't even yours, about respect. Normasa is a member of this crew now, and you will treat her with the same respect you'd show anyone else. That means no more comments about her being a burden, no more treating her like she's invisible. She's a child who's lost everything, and the least we can do is show her some basic human decency. Carl snorted. Human decency doesn't pay the bills, Captain. And last I checked, we're still broke. We'll manage. How? Nomis leaned forward, his eyes calculating. The syndicate wants their money in 2 weeks. We have maybe a quarter of what we owe, and instead of taking salvage jobs, you're playing father to an alien kid. The math doesn't work. Mayan had been dreading this conversation. They were right. The syndicate wouldn't wait, wouldn't negotiate, wouldn't care about his reasons. They'd take the ship, and then where would any of them be? But looking at his crew's faces, he saw more than just greed or fear. He saw desperation. They were all running from something, all trying to survive in a galaxy that didn't care if they lived or died. I'll handle the syndicate, he said, though he had no idea how. With what? Mariel stood, her voice rising. With hopes and dreams. They'll space us. Mayan, all of us, and your little pet alien will end up back on XK-99 or worse. Don't call her that. What a pet. That's what she is, a charity case you picked up because you're trying to replace your dead daughter. The words hit like a physical blow. Myron's hand moved before he thought about it, slamming on the table so hard the metal rang. Get out, all of you. Meetings over. Mayan. Nishalit started out. They left, but the damage was done. Mariel's words echoed in his head. Was she right? Was he trying to replace his daughter? Was he being selfish, putting his own need to be a father ahead of everyone's safety? He didn't know anymore. Normasa appeared in the doorway, her face pale. She'd heard everything. I should go. When we get to the next station, I'll clear his throat. Leave. You won't have to worry about me anymore. No, but they're right. I am a burden. You're all going to suffer because of me. I knelt down to her level, taking her small hands in his. Listen to me very carefully. You are not a burden. You are not a pet. You are not a replacement for anyone. You are Normasa, and you deserve to be protected and cared for, and I'm going to do that. No matter what anyone says, do you understand? She nodded, but tears streamed down her face. I don't want you to lose your ship because of me. Then we'll figure something out together. But figuring something out proved harder than he thought. The next station, a small outpost called Meridian 7, offered few opportunities. The job board showed mostly long-haul cargo runs that would take weeks or dangerous salvage operations in radiation zones. Nothing that would pay enough to satisfy the syndicate in time. Myron spent hours at the station's bars and trading posts, talking to contacts, looking for an angle, anything that might save them. He found nothing. The galaxy was in a recession, jobs were scarce, and time was running out. On their third night at Meridian 7, Nichelet found him in a dingy bar, nursing a drink he couldn't afford. She slid into the booth across from him, her expression serious. I sold some of my medical equipment, she said quietly. The good scanner and the tissue regenerator. Got 5,000 credits for them. Myron stared at her. Nichelet, you need those. You're medic. How are you supposed to work without them? I'll manage. And 5,000 helps, doesn't it? It did, but it also meant the ship had no proper medical bay anymore. If anyone got seriously hurt, they'd have to rely on basic first aid and prayer. I can't ask you to do this. You didn't ask. I'm offering. She paused, then added, the girl is good. Mayan, she deserves a chance, and watching you with her, it reminds me why I got into this life in the first place. Not for the money or the freedom, but to help people who need it. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We're still short by a lot. That's when Ehor appeared. Looking nervous but determined, he put a small bag on the table. My inheritance from my grandfather, 23,000 credits. It's yours if you need it. I couldn't believe what he was hearing. That's your future, your security. The kid's future is more important. Besides, you've always been fair with us, Captain, even when we didn't deserve it. This is me being fair back. One by one the crew came forward. Even Carl, gruff and silent, contributed what he could. They pulled their resources, sold personal items, called in favors. It still wasn't enough to fully satisfy the syndicate, but it was enough to buy them time, enough to negotiate a payment plan. Only Mariel and Nomi contributed nothing. They watched the others give up their savings and possessions, their faces unreadable. The door chimed. Nichelet, the ship's medic, stepped inside. She was a quiet woman, more comfortable with machines than people, but her hands were gentle when she examined Normasa the next morning. Mayan watched from the doorway as Nichelet ran her scanner over the sleeping girl, then watched the medic's face go pale. Captain, you need to see this. They moved to the medical bay where Nichelet pulled up the scan results on a holographic display. Her cellular structure is unlike anything I've seen. There are nanoparticles integrated into her cells, but they're organic, not manufactured. Watch. She showed him a recording from the examination. Normasa had a small scratch on her finger, barely visible. As Mayan watched, the wound sealed itself in seconds, the skin knitting together like it had never been broken. Rapid regeneration, Nichelet said quietly. Her body can heal almost instantly. Captain, do you understand what this means? What people would pay for a sample of her DNA? What corporations would do to study her? She's not for sale. I'm not suggesting She is, I'm warning you, if anyone finds out what she is, we'll have every bounty hunter and corporate spy in the sector hunting us. Myron thought about the identification tags about xenobiologists running across a dead planet with their daughter, running from something or someone. Can you keep this quiet? Of course, but Captain, there's someone else you need to worry about. Nomi's the ship's technician, was brilliant with systems, but Myron had never trusted him. The man had a way of being places he shouldn't be, knowing things he hadn't been told. Sure enough, when Myron checked the medical bay security logs later that night, he found a listening device hidden in the air vent. Recently installed, he crushed it under his boot and went looking for Nomi's, but the technician wasn't in his quarters or the engine room. Myron found him in the galley sharing a drink with Mariel. They stopped talking when he entered. Captain, Nomi said smoothly, something we can help you with. Stay away from the medical bay and stay away from the girl. Of course, whatever you say, but the smile on Nomi's face made Myron's skin crawl. The days turned into weeks, and the Wanderer continued its journey. Through the outer sectors, they avoided major trade routes, stuck to the margins, where corporate patrols were rare. Myron took whatever jobs he could find, small cargo runs and salvage operations, slowly building up their credits. Norma's adapted to ship life with surprising ease. She learned to read stellar maps, memorizing constellations and navigation points. She helped Nishalit organize the medical supplies, her small hands perfect for reaching into tight spaces. She even started helping in the engine room, much to Nomi's annoyance, crawling into maintenance ducts to check connections and repair frayed wiring. The kids got a natural talent for mechanics, Nishalit observed one evening. Better instincts than some engineers I've known. Myron watched Norm Massa through the observation window, her violet face smudged with grease, utterly focused on soldering a circuit board. She looked happy. For the first time since he'd found her, she looked like she belonged somewhere, but happiness never lasted long on the Wanderer. On the 23rd day after leaving XK-99, they received a transmission. The syndicate wanted to meet face to face. No negotiations over comm channels. They wanted Myron to dock at Black Harbor Station, a notorious hub for smugglers and criminals in the Crex's sector. It's a trap, Merrill said flatly when they discussed it. They're going to take the ship and space us. We shouldn't go. We have to go, Myron countered. We owe them money. If we run, they'll hunt us forever, so we die now instead of later. Great plan, Captain, but Myron had no choice. The syndicate didn't make idle threats. If he didn't show, they'd put bounties on all their heads. Wanderer would become a target for every hunter and mercenary in the sector. At least if he went willingly, he might be able to negotiate. Black Harbor Station loomed ahead, a massive structure built from scavenged ship hulls and asteroids. It spun slowly in the void, its docking bays lit with sickly green lights. Place looked diseased, cancerous. Exactly the kind of place where people disappeared and nobody asked questions. I'm going alone, Myron told the crew. As they approached, everyone stays on the ship. If I'm not back in 2 hours, jump to hyperspace and don't look back. Captain, I don't think, Nishalit started. That's an order. He turned to Normasa, who was watching from the corridor. Kid, you stay in my quarters. Lock the door. Don't come out until I get back. What if you don't come back? Then Nishalit will take care of you. Norma's eyes filled with tears. I don't want Nishalit, I want you. Myron knelt down, pulling her into a hug. I know, kid, but sometimes we don't get what we want. Sometimes we just have to be brave and hope for the best. I'm scared, me too, but being scared is okay. It means we're still alive. He left her there, crying in the corridor, and part of him wondered if he'd ever see her again. Syndicate wasn't known for mercy. They were known for making examples of people who didn't pay. Black Harbor's interior was as grim as its exterior, dark corridors lit by failing lights, walls covered in rust and graffiti, the smell of unwashed bodies in desperation. Myron navigated through crowds of criminals and outcasts, his hand never far from his blaster. The Syndicate's meeting room was in the station's core, a converted cargo bay with armed guards. At every entrance, Myron was searched, his weapons confiscated, then led inside. The room was empty except for a single table and 2 chairs, and sitting in one chair was a woman he'd hoped never to see again, Margaret, the Syndicate's enforcer. Kits. She was tall and lean, with scars crossing her face and eyes that had seen too much death to care about adding more. She smiled when she saw him, and it wasn't a pleasant smile. Mine, it's been too long. Not long enough. She laughed, a harsh sound. Still got that mouth on you. I always like that. Most people who owe us money come in here groveling, but not you. You walk in like you've got the upper hand. I don't have any hand. I'm just here to pay my debt. About that, Margaret pulled out a data pad, scrolling through numbers. You're short, way short. You've paid us 43,000 credits when you owe 90,000. That's not even half mine. I need more time. You've had 2 months. How much more time do you need? Another month. I've got jobs lined up. Good jobs. I can get you the rest. Margaret leaned back, studying him. You're lying. There are no good jobs. The economy is tanking, and small-time operators like you are dying left and right. You're broke. Your ship is falling apart, and you're out of options. She was right, and they both knew it. Mayan had nothing to bargain with, no leverage, no way out. The Syndicate had him, and they knew it. So here's what's going to happen, Margaret continued. You're going to sign over ownership of the Wanderer to us. We'll let you and your crew go, and you can find work on someone else's ship, or you can stay here and work off your debt in the station's processing plants. Either way, the Wanderer is ours. No. No, Margaret smiled, vanished. You don't get to say no, Mayan. You lost that right. When you borrowed money you couldn't pay back. The ship is my home, my life. You can't have it. I can and I will. She stood, gesturing to the guards. Take him to processing. Let him work for a few days. Maybe that'll change his mind. The guards grabbed Myron, but he fought. Stupid, pointless, but he fought anyway. He got in 2 good punches before they overwhelmed him, pinning his arms and dragging him toward a side door. He could see where it led, down into the station's bowels where people worked until they died and nobody cared. Then an explosion shook the station. Alarms blared, the lights flickered and died, replaced by emergency reds. The guards released Myron, drawing their weapons, looking for the threat. Margaret was on her comm, yelling orders. In the chaos, Mayan ran. He didn't know what had caused the explosion, didn't care. He just ran, navigating by instinct through corridors filling with smoke and panicked people. He found his confiscated blaster on a guard who'd been knocked unconscious by Falling debris, grabbed it and kept moving. When he reached the docking bay, he found the Wanderer's ramp down and Normasa standing at the top, her face pale but determined. I told you to stay. In my quarters, you were in trouble. I could feel it. She grabbed his hand. Nishalit set explosives in the station's fuel depot. We need to go. Before they find out it was us, they ran up the ramp as the station continued to shake. The crew was already at their station's engines hot, ready to launch. Myron threw himself into the captain's chair. Get us out of here now. The Wanderer detached from the docking clamps and shot into space just as security ships began to scramble. Blaster fire traced through the void, most of it missing, some of it scoring hits on their shields. Myron pushed the engines to maximum, angling for the hyperspace jump point. Calculations ready, Mariel shouted. Jump. Reality split open and they dove through. Behind them, Black Harbor station continued to burn its fuel depot, cooking off in a series of secondary explosions. They'd escaped barely in the sudden quiet of hyperspace. Mayan unbuckled and turned to his crew. They were all there, all. Nishalit was grinning, high on adrenaline. Ihor looked like he might throw up. Even Carl seemed impressed. And Normasa stood in the doorway, having saved them all by alerting Nishalit that Myron was in danger. How did you know? He asked her. I don't know, I just felt it like a pull in my chest. You were scared and I knew something was wrong. Another ability Mayan realized. Along with the healing and the bioelectric pulses, Normasa had some kind of empathic connection. Her genetic enhancements ran deeper than anyone had guessed. You disobeyed my order, he said, trying to sound stern. I saved your life. Yeah, you did. He pulled her into a hug. Thank you, kid. You're welcome, Dad. The word hung in the air. Dad, she called him Dad, not clears throat Mayan, not Captain, but Dad. And for the first time in 5 years, Mayan felt like maybe, just maybe, he deserved to be called that. But their problems weren't over. They'd made an enemy of the syndicate, and Margaret didn't forgive. She'd hunt them to the edges of the galaxy if she had to. They couldn't go back to the intersectors, couldn't dock at any station with syndicate connections. They were truly on the run now, fugitives, refugees, a family forged in desperation and fear. Over the next few days, Normasa began to open up. She followed Myron everywhere, helping him repair circuit boards with her small, nimble fingers. She told him about her parents, how her father would make funny voices for her toys and her mother would sing her to sleep. She showed him a holographic medallion that played a recording of them laughing. Myron listened to that laugh, warm and real, and thought about the two bodies lying in the sand of XK-99. He'd lost his own family years ago, a shuttle accident that had taken his wife and daughter in an instant. He'd spent the years since then running, drinking, taking stupid risks because nothing mattered anymore. But watching Normasa sketch pictures on a data pad, her tongue poking out in concentration, something in his chest cracked open. She was trusting him. She was depending on him. She called him Myron, but the way she said it sounded like Dad. He'd lost his own family years ago, a shuttle accident that had taken his wife and daughter in an instant. He'd spent the years since then running, drinking, taking stupid risks because nothing mattered anymore. But watching Normasa sketch pictures on a data pad, her tongue poking out in Concentration, something in his chest. Cracked open, she was trusting him, she was depending on him, she called him Mayan, but the way she said it sounded like Dad. He couldn't fail her, not like he'd failed his own family, the ship's. Alarms jolted him awake 3 nights. Later, Mayan rolled out of his bunk and hit the comm panel. Report, we've got company. Mariel's voice crackled back, tight with tension. 3 ships just dropped out of hyperspace behind us. No transponder signals, they're closing fast. Pirates had to be. This sector was known for raiders who preyed on small cargo vessels. Mayan ran to the cockpit, pulling on his jacket as he went. Through the viewport he could see the 3 ships, sleek and predatory, gaining on the Wanderer's slower bulk. How long until they're in weapons range? 5 minutes, maybe less. Mariel's hands flew over the controls. We can't outrun them, not with our engines. Can we jump to hyperspace? Not without finishing the calculations. We need 10 minutes. Minimum. They didn't have 10 minutes. Myron strapped into the captain's chair and pulled up the weapon systems. The Wanderer had 2 plasma cannons and a missile launcher, but the missiles were old and unreliable. He'd been meaning to replace them for months. Nishalit, I need the engines at maximum. Nomis. Divert all non-essential power to shields. Carl Ihor, get to the guns. The crew moved, their earlier conflicts forgotten in the face of immediate danger. Normasa appeared in the doorway, clutching her wire doll. What's happening? Get to my quarters and stay there. Lock the door. But now Normasa. She ran, and Myron turned back to the controls just as the lead pirate ship opened fire. The blast rocked the Wanderer, sending everyone stumbling. Shields held, but barely. Another hit like that and they'd be breached. Return fire, Myron shouted. Carl and Ihor manned the plasma cannons, sending bolts of superheated energy back at their attackers. One shot grazed the lead pirate's hull, scorching metal but not penetrating. The pirates were better armed and better shielded. This was going to be a slaughter. They're trying to disable us. Nishalit's voice came over the comm from engineering. They want the ship intact. That's good for us. Means they won't just blow us apart. Also means they want to board us. Nomi added, and pirates don't take prisoners. They can't ransom or sell. Implications hung in the air. Normasa. They'd either ransom her back to Helix Dynamics or sell her to the highest bidder. Either way she'd end up in a cage. I made a decision. Mariel on my mark. Kill all forward momentum and flip the ship 180 degrees. Carl Ihor, the second we're facing them. Fire everything. Nishalit, dump the excess coolant from the engines. Make it look like we're venting atmosphere. Captain, that's insane. Do it. The second pirate ship fired. The shot clipped their starboard side and Myron felt the ship shudder. Alarm screamed. Whole breach in the cargo bay. Not critical, but they were running out of time and options. Now Myron yelled. Mariel killed the engines and fired the maneuvering thrusters. The Wanderer spun its bulk, rotating like a dying beast. The pirates, expecting them to keep running, were caught off guard as the ship completed its rotation. Carl and Ihor opened fire. Both plasma cannons hit the lead pirate at the same time. The ship's shields flared, overloaded, and died. The hull beneath ruptured, venting atmosphere and debris. The ship spiraled away out of control. Nishalit dumped the coolant. It sprayed from the ship in a massive cloud of frozen crystals that looked exactly like atmosphere venting. From a catastrophic breach, the pirates saw it and probably thought the Wanderer was done for, but Mai had bought them. Time, Mariel, how long on those? Hyperspace calculations, 3 minutes. The other 2 pirate ships weren't giving up. They split up, coming at the Wanderer from different angles, harder to defend against, harder to target. Mai watched them close, his mind racing. 3 minutes might as well be 3 hours. They'd never make it. A lucky shot from Ihor caught one of the pirates' engines, not a kill shot, but enough to slow it down. The other pirate fired a missile. Mayan watched it streak toward them, knowing their point defense couldn't stop it. Brace for impact. The missile hit their port side and the world exploded. Mayan was thrown against his restraints. The breath knocked from his lungs. Sparks rained from the ceiling. The lights flickered and died, replaced by emergency reds. The ship groaned like a wounded animal. Shields down, Nomi yelled. One more hit and we're finished. The remaining pirate ship moved in for the kill. Myron could see its weapon ports glowing, charging for the final shot. His hand hovered over the missile launch button. Those old, unreliable missiles. He'd have one chance if they misfired, if they failed to detonate. The Wanderer and everyone on it was done. He launched both missiles. They streaked away from the ship, and for a horrible second, Myron thought they were duds. Then they detonated, one right after the other, creating a blast wave that hit the pirate ship like a fist. The ship's nose crumpled, its shields failed, and then it was drifting lifeless, its crew either dead or unconscious. Hyperspace calculations complete. Mariel screamed. Jump now. Reality tore open, and the Wanderer dove through. Behind them, the damaged pirate ships faded into nothing as they entered hyperspace. They'd made it barely. Mayan unbuckled and ran to his quarters. The door was still locked. Normasa, open up, it's me. The lock clicked and the door opened. Normasa stood there, tears streaming down her face, her whole body shaking. She'd heard everything, the explosions, the alarms. She'd thought they were going to die. Mayan pulled her into his arms. It's okay, we're safe now. I thought they were going to take me. Nobody's taking you anywhere. I promised, didn't I? She nodded against his chest, her small body still trembling. Mayan held her until the shaking stopped, until her breathing slowed. When he finally sat her down, he found the rest of the crew standing in the corridor watching them. Mariel's face was unreadable. Carl looked shaken. Ehor was pale. Nomi's had blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. And Nishalit looked exhausted, her clothes stained with coolant and grease. Good work, everyone, Myron said quietly. We all made it out alive. That's what matters. Mariel opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, then closed it. She turned and walked away without a word. Others followed, leaving Myron and Normasa alone in the corridor. They almost died because of me, Normasa whispered. They almost died because pirates attacked us. That's not your fault, but if I wasn't here, if you weren't here, I'd probably be dead already. You've given me a reason to fight, Normasa. Don't ever forget that. She looked up at him with those big eyes. Promise. They'd been traveling for another week when disaster struck. The Wanderer's hyperspace drive failed mid-jump, something that should have been impossible. One moment they were safely in the tunnel between realities, the next the ship was shuddering violently, alarms screaming, and they were being ejected back into Normal space. I fought the controls as the ship tumbled through the viewport. He caught glimpses of a planet, purple. Tinged atmosphere, jagged mountain. Ranges, they were falling fast. Engines not responding, Mario. Yelled from navigation, gravity drive. Is offline, Nishlit's voice crackled. Over the cow from engineering, they were going to crash again, just like Norma's parents. The irony wasn't lost on Myron. Everyone brace, this is going to be rough. The atmosphere hit them like a wall, the hull heated metal groaning. Under the stress, Myron fired every thruster he could, trying to slow their descent, but it wasn't enough. The ground rushed up to meet them, purple vegetation and rocky terrain, and there was nothing he could do. The impact threw him against his restraints. The world became sound and fury, metal screaming, things breaking, fire and smoke, then finally stillness. Mayan unbuckled with shaking hands. Blood dripped from a cut on his forehead. His ribs zocked, but he was alive. Sound off. Everyone report. Engineering's intact, Nishilit called. I've got some injuries, but nothing critical. Navigation systems are slag, Mario said, but I'm alive. Cargo bay is breached, Carl added. Lost about half our supplies. I whore. Silence then. Weakly, I'm here, legs broken, can't move. Myron ran to find him. Normasa. Right behind him, they found the young weapons tech pinned under a collapsed support beam in the corridor near the crew quarters. His leg was bent at an unnatural angle, his face gray with pain. We need to lift this, Myron said. Carl appeared, adding his strength. Together they managed to shift the beam enough for Normasa to crawl underneath and pull Ihor free. The young man screamed as his leg moved, then passed out from the pain. Get him to medical, Myron ordered. Nishilit, I need you to stabilize him. But when they reached the medical bay, they found it in ruins. The crash had torn through the bulkhead, venting half the room to the outside atmosphere. What equipment hadn't been destroyed was damaged beyond use. Nishilit stood in the wreckage, her face pale. I can't treat him here. I don't have anything to work with. Then we make do. Set his leg with whatever we have, splints, bandages, anything. While Nishilit worked, Myron went to check the damage to the ship. It was bad. The hyperspace drive was completely fried. The main engines had stress fractures. The hull had breaches in 3 sections. The Wanderer wasn't going anywhere without major repairs, and they didn't have the parts or equipment to do it. They were stranded on an unknown planet with no way to call for help. Mai gathered the crew and what was left of the galley. Nomi had a gash on his arm. Carl's face was bruised. Mariel's hands were burned from trying to restart the nav systems. They all looked tired and scared. Here's the situation, Myron said. We're grounded for at least a week, maybe more. We need to assess what we can salvage from the ship, set up a perimeter, and figure out if this planet is hostile. What about food? Carl asked. We lost most of our supplies in the cargo bay breach. We hunt, we forage, we survive same as we always do. And if the locals aren't friendly, Nomi's asked, then we defend ourselves, but let's not assume the worst. Maybe we'll get lucky for once. They weren't lucky. The first sign of trouble came that night. Mayan was on watch, standing outside the ship with a rifle when he heard it, a howl long and mournful echoing across the purple landscape. Then another howl answered it, and another. They were surrounded. Myron hit the ship's alarms. The crew scrambled from their makeshift sleeping quarters, grabbing weapons. Normasa appeared, clutching her wire doll. "What's happening? Get inside now!" But it was too late. The creatures emerged from the purple vegetation. They were massive, easily 3 m tall, with thick blue fur and eyes that glowed in the darkness. Hexapedal predators with jaws full of teeth designed to tear and rend. There were at least a dozen of them, moving in a coordinated pack. "Open fire!" Myron yelled. Blaster bolts lit up the night. Most missed. The creatures, too fast and too agile. One went down, but the others kept coming. They moved like liquid, flowing around obstacles, closing in on the ship. Carl's rifle jammed. Mariel's shots went wide. These things were evolved hunters, and the crew was prey. One of the creatures leaped at Myron. He fired point blank, the bolt burning through its chest, but its momentum carried it forward. It crashed into him, and they went down, a tangle of limbs and fur. The thing's jaws snapped inches from his face, its breath hot and rank. Mayan fumbled for his knife, found it, and drove the blade into the creature's throat. It gurgled and went still, but 2 more were already there, drawn by the scent of blood. Myron scrambled backward, his knife slick with gore, knowing he was about to die. Then a pulse of bioelectric energy washed over him, and the creatures convulsed and fell. Normasa stood in the ship's doorway, her body glowing with that violet light, her face twisted with concentration and fear. "Fall back!" Myron yelled. Everyone into the ship. They retreated up the ramp, firing as they went. The creatures followed, but Normasa hit them with another pulse and another. Each one dropped more of them, until finally the remaining predators fled into the night, howling their frustration. The crew collapsed inside the ship, gasping, bleeding but alive. Myron did a quick count. Everyone was accounted for. Ehor was unconscious from pain medication, but he'd survive. They'd all survived. "Nice work, kid," he told Normasa. She was trembling, the glow fading from her skin. "There's more of them out there. I can feel them watching, waiting. Then we fortify, we set up defenses, and we work fast to get this ship flying again." Over the next few days, they turned the Wanderer into a fortress. They welded metal plates over the breaches. They set up motion sensors around the perimeter. They built barriers from cargo crates and debris, and every night they took shifts on watch, rifles ready, waiting for the creatures to return. During the day, Mayan and Normasa ventured out to search for parts. The planet's purple vegetation was edible barely, and they found a stream with clean water, but they also found evidence of other crashes, old wrecks some decades old, picked clean by scavengers. This planet was a graveyard for ships that had fallen from hyperspace. On the 5th day, while Myron was working on the hyperspace drive, Normasa came running back to the ship, her face flushed with excitement. "I found something you need to see." She led him through the purple forest to a clearing. In the center was another ship, this one intact, well, mostly intact. It had been Clear's throat there for years, judging by the overgrowth, but the hull was still sound, and more importantly, it had parts they could use. "Good eye, kid," Myron said, already cataloging what they could salvage. "This might just save us." They spent 2 days stripping the derelict ship of everything useful: hyperdrive components, power couplings, hull plates, tools. They worked from dawn to dusk, always watching for the predators. but they creatures seemed to have learned their lesson. They kept their distance. With the new parts, Nishalit and Nomis were able to repair the Wanderer systems. It wasn't pretty, and it definitely wasn't regulation, but it would fly, that's all that mattered. On their last night on the planet, as they prepared for launch, Normasa sat with Myron on the ship's ramp. Above them the sky was filled with stars, more than he'd ever seen on any world. It was beautiful in a stark, lonely way. Do you think my parents felt like this? Normasa asked, scared and alone on XK-99. Probably, but they had each other and they had you to protect. That gave them strength, like you have me now. Yeah, kid, like I have you now. He put his arm around her shoulders. We're going to get through this, all of it. Syndicate, Helix Dynamics, whatever else comes, because we're family, and family doesn't give up. I like being family. Me too. They launched the next morning, the Wanderer groaning and shaking, but holding together. As they climbed through the purple atmosphere, Mayan looked back at the planet one last time. It had almost killed them, but it had also brought them closer, shown them what they were capable of when they worked together. Once they cleared the gravity well, Myron plotted a course for the outer rim, somewhere far from the Syndicate, far from Helix Dynamics. Somewhere they could disappear. One night, unable to sleep, he went through Norm Massa's backpack more thoroughly. At the bottom, wrapped in a shirt, was a data pad with a cracked screen. Her father's, by the look of it. Mayan powered it up and spent 2 hours breaking the encryption. What he found made his blood run cold. Journal entries. Dr. Kalen had been meticulous in his documentation. They'd been working for a genetic research firm called Helix Dynamics, studying rapid cellular regeneration in deep space organisms. Then they made a discovery: some species could pass on regenerative traits to their offspring under specific environmental conditions. Helix Dynamics had wanted to test it. They'd wanted to create a hybrid. Normasa was that hybrid. Her mother had volunteered for the genetic therapy while pregnant, not understanding what the company really wanted: a living laboratory, a renewable source of regenerative cells. When the parents realized the truth, when they saw the containment facilities being prepared, they'd run, stolen a transport, and fled into the outer rim, bouncing from one dead world to another, always staying ahead of the search teams. Until XK-99. Until the crash. My sat in the dark, the data pad's glow illuminating his face. Normasa wasn't just a lost child. She was property as far as Helix Dynamics was concerned, and they had the legal documentation to prove it. If they found her, they'd take her, lock her in a lab, study her, use her. The ship shuddered as they dropped out of hyperspace. Myron checked the navigation display. Omega-4 refueling station. A necessary stop, but he didn't like it. Omega-4 was a haven for smugglers and worse, but they needed supplies, and the Wanderer's fuel cells were running low. Mariel was insistent about going to the station. We need to restock, and the girl needs proper clothes, not those rags. Let me take her shopping while you handle the refueling. Norma clapped her hands together. Can I get a new dress, one like Mama used to wear? Something about Mariel's smile didn't sit right, but Mayan was exhausted from worry and lack of sleep. Nishalit caught his arm as they were leaving. Captain, I don't trust this. Nomis has been too quiet lately. Something's wrong. Keep the ship locked down. Nobody gets in or out except us, but as Mariel led Norm Massa down the docking tube toward the station's main concourse, Myron's instinct screamed at him. He checked the ship's internal cameras, rewinding to that morning. There Nomi and Mariel in a storage bay, heads close together, whispering. Nomi handed her something, a data chip. Myron was running before he fully understood what he'd seen. The station's corridors were crowded with traders and travelers, but he pushed through them, following the tracker signal from Norma's medallion, and the signal led him away from the shopping district into the industrial section where the real business of Omega-4 happened. He turned a corner and saw them, Mariel holding Norma's hand, leading her toward a group of armed men in unmarked armor. The girl was smiling, excited about her new dress. She didn't see the credit chip changing hands. She didn't see Mariel stepping back away from her. Then she did. Norma's smile died. Mariel clears throat. What's happening? Sorry, kid, nothing personal. One of the men reached for Normasa. She screamed, Mayan, help me. Mayan drew his blaster and fired a warning shot over their heads. Let her go. The men scattered for cover, drawing their own weapons. Mariel ran. Myron got off 3 more shots before something hit him from behind, an electric shock that turned his muscles to water. He collapsed, the blaster skittering across the floor. Nomi stood over him with a shock stick, grinning. Clears throat. Nothing personal, Captain. Business is business. Nichelet was there too, trying to fight, but they overwhelmed her quickly. The last thing Myron saw before they dragged him away was Normasa's terrified face as the mercenary surrounded her. They threw Myron and Nichelet into a cargo container, the kind used for shipping bulk goods across the station. The door slammed shut, leaving them in darkness. Mayan pounded on the walls until his fist bled, but the metal was thick and soundproof. Nichelet slumped against the wall, her breathing ragged. They're going to space us, she said quietly. Dump the container outside the station. No bodies, no evidence. Shut up, I'm thinking. Think fast, Captain. We've got maybe an hour before they clear us for ejection. But Mayan wasn't thinking about escape. He was thinking about Normasa, about the trust in her eyes when she'd hugged him good night, about how he'd promised her parents, even if they couldn't hear it, that he'd keep their daughter safe. He'd failed again. The container jolted, and he heard the mechanical whine of the cargo systems engaging. They were being moved to an airlock. Nichelet started to cry, quiet sobs that she tried to muffle. Mayan closed his eyes and thought about his wife and daughter waiting for him, and whatever came after. Then the door exploded open. The sudden light blinded him. Mayan threw up his arm, squinting, and saw a small silhouette standing in the doorway. Normasa. Her clothes were torn and her face was streaked with dirt and tears, but she was alive and free. Behind her, the corridor's lights flickered and sparked. The gravity felt wrong, fluctuating. My Nichelet, come on. She grabbed his hand with her small one and pulled. We have to run. They stumbled out of the container into chaos. Station alarms wailed. Emergency. Lights strobed red. People ran in every direction, some in zero gravity, some staggering as the gravity generators kicked in and out. Normasa led them through the confusion with surprising confidence, taking service corridors and maintenance shafts that she shouldn't have known about. How did you? Myron started to ask. I bit one of them and ran into a vent. They couldn't follow me. Because they're too big, I crawled in. Crawled until I found the control room. She was breathless, excited despite the terror. I remembered what you taught me. Blue button, then red button. I opened all the containers. The station was in complete disarray. Normasa had opened every cargo container in the loading bay, and most of them contained contraband. Smugglers and criminals were now scrambling to recover their illegal goods before station security arrived. Fights broke out, shots were fired. Chaos was perfect cover, but it also meant danger around every corner. They turned into a service corridor and almost ran into a group of smugglers hauling crates of weapons. The men looked at them, at Normasa's violet skin and clear throat. One of them raised a rifle. That's the kid, the one with the bounty. I pushed Normasa behind him. Walk away. Can't do that, friend. That little girl is worth $500,000. Credits to the right people. She's worth nothing to dead men. The smugglers' finger tightened on the trigger. Mayan dove to the side, pulling Normasa with him. As the rifle barked, the shot went wide, hitting a power conduit. Sparks exploded, and the lights in the corridor died. In the darkness, Mayan ran, dragging Normasa behind him. More shots followed them, ricocheting off metal walls. Normasa stumbled, and Myron caught her, lifting her into his arms. She was light, barely any weight at all, but his lungs burned and his legs ached. He wasn't young anymore, couldn't run like this forever. They burst into a wider corridor and found themselves in the middle of a standoff. Station security on one side, a group of armed criminals on the other. Both groups turned their weapons toward the new arrivals. Don't move, a security officer yelled. Myron saw Nishalit and the crowd of civilians pressed against the walls. She caught his eye and mouth. Something he couldn't hear over the shouting, but he read her lips. Vent above you. Myron looked up. There in the ceiling was a maintenance hatch, but it was 3 up. No way to reach it unless Norm, he said quietly, when I throw you, grab that hatch. Can you do that? She looked up, her eyes wide. You're going to throw me? Trust me, I trust you. Security officer was still shouting orders. The criminals were shouting back. Nobody was paying attention to one man and a small girl. Myron bent down, putting Norm Masa on his shoulders, like he used to do with his daughter. On 3, 1, 2, 3, he stood up fast, using all his strength to launch her upward. Norma's flew, her small hands reaching for the hatch. She caught it, her fingers finding purchase on the edge. With surprising strength, she pulled herself up and into the vent. Then shots rang out. The standoff had erupted into a firefight. Myron dropped to the floor, covering his head as blaster bolts flew overhead. Someone screamed. Someone else fell. It was chaos, pure and brutal. Nishalit crawled across the floor toward him. We need to move the vent. Norm is in the vent. They scrambled toward the wall. As the fighting continued, Myron jumped, grabbed the edge of the hatch, and pulled himself up with strength born of desperation. Nishalit followed above them in the narrow maintenance shaft. Normasa waited with her wire doll. Clutch tight, this way, she said, pointing down the shaft. I came from there. It leads to the lower levels. They crawled through the vents, the sounds of the firefight fading behind them. The shaft was narrow and hot, the air thick with the smell of recycled atmosphere and machine oil. Myron's shoulders scraped the sides, his back ached, but they kept moving. After what Felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. They found another hatch. Normasa pushed it open and dropped down into a dark corridor. Mayan and Nishalit followed. They were in the station's lower maintenance level where the environmental systems and power generators lived. It was deserted. Workers had evacuated when the chaos started. Which way to the docks? Myron asked. Nishalit pulled out her data pad, but the screen was cracked from the fall. Navigation systems are down. We're going to have to find it the old-fashioned way. They picked a direction and ran. The corridor branched and twisted. They passed rooms full of humming machinery, water treatment facilities, air processors, everything that kept Omega-4 alive, but nobody ever saw. The sounds of alarms were distant here, muffled by metal and machinery. Then they turned a corner and nearly ran into Nomi's. The technician was bleeding from a head wound. Disoriented, he saw them and fumbled for his weapon. Normasa pushed Myron behind her. The girl closed her eyes and suddenly the air around her seemed to shimmer. Myron felt every hair on his body stand up. A pulse of bioelectric energy exploded from Normasa like a wave. It hit Nomi's and threw him backward into a wall with bone-breaking force. The lights in the entire sector went dark. Emergency power kicked in seconds later, but Nomi didn't get up. Normasa swayed, her face pale, and Myron caught her before she fell. Sorry, she whispered. I got scared. I didn't mean to. You did good, kid. You did real good. He lifted her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing. Nishalit can. You walk better than I can fly. Let's get to the ship. They made it halfway to the docking bay before the mercenaries found them. 6 armed men blocked the corridor, weapons raised. Mariel was with them, her face twisted with anger. You're not taking our payday, Mayan. That girl is worth millions. We're not going to let some washed-up drunk ruin this for us. Mayan set Normasa down gently. Get behind me. But behind me now. The girl obeyed, though her small hand clutched the back of his jacket. Myron faced down 6 blasters with nothing but his own half-charge weapon. Not great odds, but he'd been in worse spots probably. Last chance, Mariel. Walk away. You walk away. Leave the girl. No. The standoff stretched. Then Nishalit did something unexpected. She pulled out her data pad and started typing frantically. Captain, if I can access the station's security systems, you can't. Mariel laughed. We're not idiots. We cut the ceiling exploded with metal and fury. Security drones, 8 of them, dropped into the corridor with weapons. Hot, they're targeting lasers painted red. Dots across the mercenary's chest. Mechanical voice echoed from the drones. Drop your weapons. This is Omega Forest Station security. You are in violation of the mercenaries. Open fire. Mistake. The drones returned fire with precision that only machines could manage. Myron grabbed Normasa and ran. Nishalit right behind them, screams and the smell of ozone filled the air. Mariel's voice rose above the chaos, cursing them, but Myron didn't look back. They reached the Wanderer and sealed the airlock behind them. Mayan threw himself into the pilot's seat and fired up the engines. The station's docking clamps tried to hold them, but he overrode the safety protocols and ripped free, tearing metal. Alarms screamed, warning lights flashed. He didn't care. Snorts. The Wanderer shot out of the station like a bullet. Engines redlining. Normasa strapped herself into the co-pilot seat, her Small hands gripping the armrest. Are we safe now? Not yet. Hold on. Two ships detach from the station's lower docks. Pursuit craft marked with Helix Dynamics. Colors, they'd been here waiting. Clear's throat, Nomi's and Mariel hadn't been working alone. They'd contacted the company. Mayan pushed the Wanderer harder, angling for the hyperspace jump point. The pursuit ships gained faster and better armed. Nichelet, I need those engines at 110%. They'll burn out, then we'll burn out. Fast, do it. The ship lurched as Nichelet diverted all power to the engines. The whole temperature skyrocketed. The pursuit ships were close enough now that Myron could see their weapons charging. The Wanderer bored it. Take Normasa. He couldn't let that happen. He wouldn't. The hyperspace calculations finished. Mayan hit the jump button. For one horrible second, nothing happened. The engines wed, the ship shuddered. Then reality tore open in front of them. A tunnel of impossible light, and the Wanderer dove through. They tumbled into hyperspace with the pursuit ships right behind them. The tunnel walls flickered and pulsed, and Myron could see the other ships' energy signatures keeping pace. Damn, they were going to follow them all the way through. When they dropped out, it would be a fight. The Wanderer couldn't win. Normasa, remember when I showed you the emergency systems? She nodded, her eyes huge. The blue panel by your left hand, open. As she did. Inside were a series of switches and buttons, all labeled in technical shorthand. I taught her the basics while they were working on repairs. You see the switch that says debris protocol? Yes, when I tell you. Flip it. Okay. Mayan watched the hyperspace tunnel, waiting for the right moment. The physics of hyperspace were tricky. Matter couldn't exist in the tunnel for long without a proper drive field, but if you ejected something behind you at just the right moment. Now Normasa flipped the switch. The Wanderer's cargo bay doors blew open, and everything not bolted down got sucked into the hyperspace tunnel. Empty fuel, drums, spare parts, tools, junk they'd collected from XK-99. All of it became a cloud of deadly shrapnel traveling at relativistic speeds. The first pursuit ship hit it. Like a wall, the ship's shield flared, overloaded, and died without shields. The debris tore it apart. The second ship tried to bank away, but clipped the debris field. Its engine pod exploded, and it fell out of hyperspace in a flash of light. They were alone in the tunnel. Normasa stared at the controls, then at Myron. Did we kill them? They gave us no choice, kid. She was quiet for a long moment, then softly, I know. They dropped out of hyperspace 3 sectors away, in a dead zone between star systems where nobody went. Mayan cut the engines and let the Wanderer drift. For the first time in days, they could breathe. Nichelet emerged from the engine room covered in coolant and sweat. We made it barely. Those engines won't jump again without a full rebuild. We'll manage. Mayan unbuckled from the pilot seat and turned to Norma. She was still strapped in, staring out at the stars. Hey, you okay? Mayan, when are we really going to see my parents? The question hit him like a physical blow. He'd been avoiding this, hiding from it. But Nichelet was right. Every moment he waited made it worse, and Normasa deserved the truth. She'd earned it. He unstrapped her and carried her to his quarters, setting her down on his bunk. Then he pulled out the identification tags and held them in his palm. Normasa, I need to tell you something. And it's going to hurt, but you need to No, she looked at the tags and something in her face changed, like she'd been waiting for this, dreading it, but knowing it was coming. They're not at the station, are they? No, kid, there. Not. His voice broke. I found them at the Blue Cliffs. They didn't make it. The radiation was too strong. They died trying to fix the antenna so they could call for help to come get you. Tears streamed down Norma's face, but she didn't make a sound. She just stared at the tags, her small body shaking. I knew. I think I always knew, but I didn't want to believe it. If I kept waiting, if I kept believing, maybe it wouldn't be true. Mayan pulled her into his arms and held her while she cried. Silent, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere deep inside. He cried too. For her parents, for his own family, for all the people they'd both lost. Nicolette stood in the doorway, her hand over her mouth, tears on her cheeks. After a long time, Normasa pulled back and wiped her eyes. Can I keep the tags? Of course, they're yours. She clutched them to her chest, then looked up at him with red, swollen eyes. What happens to me now? Where do I go? Mayan thought about that, thought about Helix Dynamics and their legal claims, thought about the bounty hunters who'd be looking for her, thought about all the people who'd see her as nothing but a commodity. Then he thought about her small hand in his, trusting him completely. You stay with me if you want to. As what? As my daughter, if you'll have me as a father. Norma threw herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck so tight he could barely breathe. Yes, yes, I want that. Nicolette stepped into the room. Captain, they'll never stop looking for her. Helix Dynamics, the syndicate. Everyone who knows what she is will be running for the rest of our lives. Then we run. Myron looked at her over Norm's head. But we're not running alone, are you with us? Nicolette smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her in years. Someone has to keep this bucket flying. And clears throat. Someone has to make sure you two eat vegetables. Norma laughed, a wet, hiccuping sound, but a laugh nonetheless. Myron stood holding her on his hip like his daughter used to like, and walked to the cockpit. Through the viewport, the stars stretched out in every direction, endless possibilities. Where should we go? Normasa asked. Wherever we want. The galaxy's big enough to get lost in. Myron sat down at the controls with Normasa on his lap. But first, we need to make some changes. New names, new ship registry, new everything. We're starting fresh. What should we call the ship? He thought about it. What was your favorite thing your mom used to say? Normasa smiled through her tears. She used to say, home is wherever your heart is safe. Then we'll call it Safe Harbor. How's that? I love it. Over the next few days they transformed the Wanderer. Nicolette repainted the whole plates, changing the ship's colors from rust red to deep blue. Myron forged new registration documents, creating a new identity for all of them. Normasa helped, learning how to use the fabrication equipment to make new ID chips. She was smart, picking up technical skills faster than any child he'd ever seen. They kept moving, never staying in one place long enough to be tracked. Myron used his old smuggler contacts to find work that didn't ask questions, small jobs, nothing too dangerous but enough to keep them fed and fueled. Normasa proved useful in unexpected ways. Her small size let her access maintenance areas that adults couldn't reach. Her regenerative abilities meant injuries that would sideline them for days healed overnight. She never complained, never asked for luxuries. She was just happy. To be safe, to be wanted to have someone call her name with love instead of as a laboratory designation. Mayan taught her everything he knew about flying, about surviving in the dark spaces between civilized worlds. Nishalit taught her medicine and mechanics. They were becoming a real family, but the ghosts followed them. Sometimes Mayan would wake up at night and find Normasa standing at the viewport staring at the stars, her face sad, thinking about them. He'd ask and she'd nod. He'd sit with her then, telling her stories about his own family, about the wife and daughter he'd lost. They'd share their grief in the quiet of the ship's night cycle, and somehow it helped. Do you think they'd be proud of me? Normasa asked one night. My real parents. They'd be so proud they'd burst. You're brave and smart and kind, everything they wanted you to be. Do you think your family would be okay with you having a new daughter? Mayan had to swallow hard before he could answer. I think they'd love you, and I think they'd be happy I'm not alone anymore. 3 months after Omega 4, they got word through the underground channels. Mariel had been arrested, trying to sell information about Normasa to a rival genetics firm. Nomi's was still in Station Medical, recovering from the bioelectric pulse that had scrambled his brain. Helix Dynamics had officially declared their search for Sample 47 as inactive, though Myron knew better. They just gone quiet, waiting for a lead. The syndicate had given up on collecting Myron's debt. They'd written it off when the Wanderer disappeared, probably assuming he'd died in some debris field. It was a small mercy, but he'd take it. They were in free space between jobs when Nishalit found something interesting on the long-range scanners. A settlement new, built in the last year on a planet called Haven's Edge. The planetary government was offering land grants to colonists, no questions asked about their past. They were building something there, a place where people could start over. Mayan brought up the planet's profile on the main screen. Green continents, blue oceans, yellow sun. Earth-like, safe, a real home. What do you think? He asked Normasa. She studied the image, her head tilted. Are there other children there? Colony listings say there are about 40 families. Probably some kids your age. And we'd stay, not keep running. We'd stay, plant some roots, maybe even get a house with an actual yard. Norma bit her lip, thinking. Then she looked at him with those big eyes that reminded him why he'd risked everything. Would I have to go to school? Probably, and you'd be there at home every night. I promise. Then yes, let's go there. Nishalit plotted the course, and the safe harbor jumped toward Haven's Edge. As they traveled through hyperspace, Myron found himself thinking about the future for the first time in years. Maybe he could get work as a mechanic. Maybe Nishalit could set up a medical practice. Maybe Normasa could just be a kid playing with friends, going to school, having a normal life. Maybe they could stop running. Planet grew larger in the viewport, a beautiful blue-green jewel hanging in space. Normasa pressed her face to the glass, her breath fogging it up. It's pretty. Yeah, it is. They descended through the atmosphere, and for once, the landing was smooth. No alarms, no emergency protocols, just a gentle touchdown on a proper landing pad. Colony spaceport was small but well-maintained. People moved about their business, loading cargo, greeting arrivals. Normal, safe. A woman in a colony administrator's uniform approached as they opened the hatch. She was middle-aged with kind eyes and a welcoming smile. Welcome to Havens. Edge, I'm Administrator Sarah. Are you here to settle or just passing through? Settle, Mayan said, taking Norm Massa's hand. If you'll have us. Sarah's eyes fell on Normasa, taking in her violet skin and alien features. For a moment, Myron's hand tightened on his daughter's, ready to defend her, but Sarah just smiled wider. We're a colony of second chances here. Everyone's running from something or looking for something. As long as you're willing to work and be part of the community, you're welcome. Normasa squeezed Myron's hand. He looked down at her and saw hope blazing in her eyes, bright and fierce. Thank you, he said to Sarah. We'll work hard, I'm sure. You will. Let me show you the available land plots. As they walked through the colony, Normasa chattered excitedly, pointing at everything. The houses with gardens, the school building with its solar panels, the central square where colonists had set up a market. Children ran past laughing, and some of them waved at Normasa. She waved back, shy but smiling. Myron felt something in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. Peace, maybe even happiness. He looked back at the safe harbor, sitting on the landing pad with Nishalet, making sure everything was powered down properly. Then he looked at Normasa, skipping ahead to see a flower garden someone had planted. Then he looked at the sky, clear and blue and endless with possibility. They'd been running for so long, running from grief, from guilt, from people who wanted to use them. But maybe it was time to stop running. Maybe it was time to stand still and build something, a home, a life, a future. That night in their temporary quarters at the colonial housing complex, Mayan tucked Normasa into bed. She clutched her wired doll in one hand and her parents' identification tags in the other. Mayan, thank you for not leaving me behind. I couldn't leave you behind. Kid, you're stuck with me now, she giggled. Good, because you're stuck with me too. Best thing that ever happened to me. Will you tell me a story about the stars? He did. He told her about nebulae that looked like flowers, about binary stars that danced around each other for eternity, about rogue planets wandering alone in the dark. He told her about brave captains and loyal crews and impossible adventures. And when her eyes started to close, when her breathing deepened into sleep, he whispered, your parents would be so proud of you, and I promise I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of being your dad. He kissed her forehead and stood to leave, but her small voice stopped him. Mayan, I love you. He turned back, his vision blurry with tears. I love you too, kid. Forever. Outside, the colony was settling into its night cycle. Lights glowed in windows. People called good night to their neighbors. Nishalet stood on the small porch looking up at the stars. Myron joined her. Think we'll be safe here? She asked. Safe enough, and if trouble comes, we'll face it together. That girl is special, Captain, not just because of what she is, but who she is. She's got something in her that can't be manufactured or stolen. She's got heart. Yeah, she does. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, Helix Dynamics was probably still searching. Somewhere, bounty hunters were checking leads. Somewhere, people saw Normasa as nothing but a commodity. But here on Havens Edge, she was just a girl, a daughter, a member of a family that had chosen each other. The next morning, Mayan woke to the smell of something burning. He rushed to the kitchen and found Normasa standing on a chair trying to cook Breakfast, the eggs were more char than food, but she looked so proud of herself that he couldn't help but laugh. What's all this? I wanted to make breakfast for my family like real families do. He pulled her into a hug, not caring about the burnt eggs or the smoke alarm that was starting to chirp. You are real family, Normasa, the realest I've ever had. Nicholet stumbled in her hair mess and took in the chaos. I see we're starting as we mean to go on. Somebody teach this girl to cook before she burns down the colony. The three of them ate burnt eggs and laughed about it, and it was perfect. Later they went to see about the land plots. Sarah showed them a piece of property on the edge of the settlement backing onto a forest of native trees with silver leaves. There was room for a house, a garden, maybe even a small workshop. Normasa ran across the empty land, her arms spread wide, spinning in circles. This one, Myron said, we'll take this one. Excellent choice. You'll have good neighbors. The family next door has a daughter about her age. Sarah paused. Era, if you don't mind me asking, what brings you to Haven's Edge? You seem like you've been running from something. I watched Normasa discover a patch of wild flowers, her face lighting up. But we're done running now. We're here to build a home, then welcome home. Over the following weeks they built their house. Mayan and Nicholet did most of the heavy work, but Normasa helped where she could, carrying tools and holding boards steady. The neighbors came by to assist, bringing food and offering advice. Girl next door, a human child named Emma, befriended Normasa immediately. They played together in the afternoons. While the adults worked, the house took shape slowly. 4 rooms, a kitchen, a porch with a view of the forest. Nothing fancy, but it was theirs. Normasa picked out paint colors for her room, bright yellows and soft purples. She hung her drawings on the walls. She planted a garden with Emma's help, choosing flowers that reminded her of home. She was healing. They all were. One evening, as the sun set over Haven's Edge, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Normasa stood on the porch with Myron. She held her parents' identification tags, looking at them in the fading light. I used to be so angry at them for leaving me alone, for dying, but I understand now. They were trying to protect me. They loved you more than anything, I know, and they'd want me to be happy to live. She looked up at him. I am happy here with you. Me too, kid, but their peace was not to last. 3 months after settling on Haven's Edge, a ship arrived that changed everything. It was late afternoon when the alarm sounded, the colony's early warning system detecting an unscheduled landing. Myron was in his workshop when he heard them, and something cold settled in his gut. He knew, somehow he just knew. He ran to the house. Normasa, Nicholet, we need to go now. Nicholet appeared from the kitchen, her hands covered in flour. What's wrong? Ship incoming. Unscheduled, clears throat. It's them, it has to be. Normasa came running from her room, her face pale. Helix Dynamics, I don't know, but we're not waiting to find out. I grabbed their emergency packs, the ones he'd prepared weeks ago, and hoped they'd never need. Safe harbor. We get to the ship and we run, but as they ran toward the spaceport, they saw the ship descending. It was sleek and black, corporate markings on its hull, Helix Dynamics, and it was landing between them in the safe harbor. Back to the house, Myron yelled. They ran, but it was too late. 3 figures in tactical Armor emerged from the newly landed ship, moving with military precision. They spread out, weapons raised, scanning the colony looking for something for someone. Myron pulled Norm Masasa into an alley between two houses, his heart hammered. After all these months, after all their running, they'd been found. How he'd been so careful. New identities, new ship registration, no contact with anyone from his old life. Captain Myron, a voice called out, amplified and distorted by helmet speakers. We know you're here. We know you have our property. Surrender her peacefully and no one gets hurt. Norma's hand tightened in his. She was shaking. Myron looked at Nichelet, saw his own fear reflected in her eyes. 3 armed soldiers against a scavenger, a medic, and a child. Not good odds. What do we do? Nichelet whispered. Before Myron could answer, someone else did. Administrator Sarah stepped into the square, her hands empty and visible. This is Haven's Edge Colony. We don't recognize corporate authority here. You need to leave. One of the soldiers laughed. This isn't a negotiation. Administrator, we have legal claim to the subject. Stand aside. No. And then, to Myron's amazement, other colonists began to emerge, farmers carrying tools that could serve as weapons, traders holding cargo hooks, families standing together, creating a wall between the soldiers and the houses. They didn't know Normasa well, didn't know her story, but they knew she was one of theirs, and Haven's Edge protected its own. Clear's throat. The lead soldier raised his weapon. Last warning, stand down or a rock flew through the air. Thrown by Emma's father, it bounced off the soldier's helmet, then another and another. The colonists were fighting back with the only weapons they had, stones and anger, and the refusal to let outsiders take one of their children. The Snort soldiers opened fire, not with lethal weapons, but with stunners. Colonists fell, their bodies convulsing. Emma's father went down, then her mother, Sarah, tried to run and was hit in the back. She collapsed. Myron couldn't watch anymore. He stepped out of the alley, his old blaster in his hand. You want her, you go through me first. The lead soldier turned. Captain Myron, we hoped you'd be reasonable, but if you insist on making this difficult. He raised his weapon. Wait. Normasa pulled free from Myron's grip and ran into the square. Stop. Don't hurt anyone else. I'll go with you. Just leave them alone. Norma, no. I lunged for her, but one of the soldiers hit him with a stun blast. He went down hard, his muscles locking up, his vision swimming through the haze. He saw them grab Normasa, saw her struggling, saw the terror on her face. Then he saw something else, something wonderful and terrible. Norma's eyes began to glow, that pale violet that matched her skin, but brighter, brighter than he'd ever seen. The air around her shimmered and crackled with energy. The soldiers holding her jerked back, crying out as electricity arced from her body to theirs. Their armor sparked and smoked. Let them go, Normasa screamed. Let everyone go. The bioelectric pulse exploded from her like a wave. It hit the soldiers, overloading their armor systems. It hit their ship, killing its engines. It rolled across the colony like thunder, and every electronic device within 100 meters died. Lights went out, equipment shut down. Even Myron's blaster sparked and went dead in his hand. The soldiers collapsed, unconscious or dead. I couldn't tell. Normasa stood in the center of the square, breathing hard, her whole body glowing with residual energy. Then the Light faded and she fell to her knees. Mayan dragged himself to her, his muscles still twitching from the stun blast. Normasa, kid, can you hear me? Her eyes opened. Mayan, did I hurt them? You protected us, you saved everyone. Colonists were stirring, those who'd been stunned starting to wake up. They stared at Normasa with a mixture of awe and fear. She'd shown them what she was, what she could do, and Mayan knew that. Some of them would never look at her the same way again, but Sarah struggled to her feet and walked to Normasa. She knelt down, ignoring the unconscious soldiers, and put a hand on the girl's shoulder. Thank you, you saved us. Others came forward, Emma's father rubbing his head but smiling, the traitor who'd thrown the first rock, families who'd stood against armed soldiers for a child they barely knew. They gathered around Normasa, not in fear but in gratitude. We need to secure these soldiers, someone said, and figure out what to do with them and their ship, another added. We can't let them leave and report back. Myron looked at the black ship, its engines dead from Norma's pulse. Then he looked at the safe harbor and its hangar. Then he looked at the colonists, these people who'd risked everything for strangers. We need to disappear, he said, all of us. If Helix Dynamics sent one team, they'll send more, and next time they'll come with bigger guns. Run again? Nishalit asked quietly. No, not run. Myron stood, pulling Normasa up with him. We go deeper, further out. There are colonies beyond the outer rim, places so remote even corporations can't reach them. We take anyone who wants to come, and we build something new, something safe. Sarah laughed, but it was a bitter sound. You're talking about abandoning Haven's Edge, everything we've built. I'm talking about saving your people. You saw what they were willing to do. They stunned unarmed civilians. Next time they'll bring lethal force. Next time people will die. The colonists looked at each other. Some were afraid, some were angry, some were already thinking about what they'd need to pack. The choice was before them. Stay and fight a war they couldn't win, or leave and try again somewhere new. Emma's father spoke up. My daughter adores Normasa. They play together every day. If staying here means watching armed soldiers take her away, then I vote we go. We find somewhere safer. Others nodded. More voices rose in agreement. Not everyone, some would stay, would take their chances with Helix Dynamics, but enough agreed. Enough were willing to abandon the homes they'd built for the hope of something better. Over the next 3 days, the colony worked frantically. They stripped the Helix Dynamics ship for parts and supplies. They packed what they could carry and destroyed what they couldn't. They secured the unconscious soldiers in a cargo container with enough food and water to last 2 weeks, along with a distress beacon that would activate once the colonists were long gone. Sarah coordinated the evacuation with military efficiency. 23 families decided to leave. The rest would stay, would maintain Haven's Edge, and face whatever came. It was a hard goodbye, but necessary. On the morning of departure, Myron stood on his porch one last time, looking at the house he'd built with his own hands. Norma's garden was in full bloom, yellow and purple flowers swaying in the breeze. He'd thought this would be forever, thought they'd finally found a place to stop running, but maybe there was no such place. Maybe running was just part of life now, as long as Normasa was safe, as long as they were together. Home could be anywhere. Normasa appeared beside him, her small pack on her shoulders, Are you sad about leaving? A little, but not as sad as I'd be if we stayed and lost you. Where will we go? Somewhere better, somewhere they'll never find us. He took her hand. Ready, ready, the convoy of ships lifted off together. The safe harbor led the way with 24 other vessels following. Farmers, transports, family shuttles, cargo haulers converted into living quarters. They looked like refugees, and in a way they were refugees from a galaxy that saw people like Normasa as commodities instead of children. As they climbed into the atmosphere, Mayan looked back one last time at Haven's edge. Smoke rose from the abandoned sections. The lights were dying as the remaining colonists shut down the empty quadrants. It looked like a ghost town already. Where to? Captain Nishalit asked from the navigator station. Myron pulled up the star charts, looking at the empty spaces. Beyond the outer rim, there were rumors of colonies out there, settlements so remote they didn't even appear on official maps. Pirates and smugglers knew about them, and now so would he. There he pointed to a sector marked only as unexplored space. We go there, and we don't stop until we find a place so far from everything that even Helix Dynamics won't bother to look. That's a lot of space to search, Captain. Then we better get started. They jumped to hyperspace, and Haven's edge vanished behind them. In the crew quarters, Normasa sat with Emma and the other children who'd come along. They were scared, all of them, but they had each other, and they had adults who'd proven they'd do anything to keep them safe. Days became weeks. The convoy jumped from system to system, always moving, never staying long enough to be tracked. They traded for supplies at backwater stations, avoided any ship with corporate markings, and slowly pushed further into the unknown. Then 6 weeks after leaving Haven's edge, they found it, a planet orbiting a binary star system so far from established trade routes that it didn't even have a designation number. The survey showed breathable atmosphere, abundant water, and no signs of previous habitation. It was perfect. The colonists named it New Beginning. Min thought it was a bit on the nose, but nobody asked his opinion. They landed in a broad valley surrounded by mountains near a river that flowed year-round. The planet's vegetation was strange blue-green plants with leaves that moved in the wind like they were alive, but the soil was rich and the water was clean, and there was room for everyone. This time they built differently. No central colony where they'd be easy targets. Instead, they spread out, creating small settlements connected by trails and communication relays, defensible, sustainable, hidden. The first weeks on New Beginning tested them all. I worked from dawn to dusk, helping families establish their homestead. The planet's bluewood trees were harder than earth timber, requiring special tools to cut and shape. Stone from the mountains was volcanic, full of air pockets that made it lighter but also more fragile. They learned through trial and error, buildings collapsing and being rebuilt stronger. Normasa threw herself into colony life with enthusiasm. She helped Emma's mother plant gardens, learning which earth crops could be adapted and which needed to be abandoned. She assisted Nishalit in setting up a medical station, organizing supplies, and learning basic first aid. At night, she and the other children would gather around fires while the adults told stories of Earth, of the old days before corporations and syndicates controlled everything. Omar proved himself invaluable. his knowledge of security. Systems helped them set up perimeter. Sensors using salvaged parts and local materials. He taught the colonists how to create deadfall traps and early warning systems, how to hide heat signatures, how to move through forest without leaving traces, skills that might save their lives if trouble came. And trouble always came. 2 months into their settlement, Carl found tracks near the northern boundary, large prints 6 clawed, each one as big as his hand. Whatever made them was massive. They set up watch posts and armed patrols. 3 nights later, they heard the howling for the first time, deep and resonant, coming from multiple directions at once. Pack hunters, Myron organized hunting parties not to kill the creatures, but to understand them. They tracked the pack for days, learning their territory and habits. The beasts were intelligent, avoiding the settled areas, taking only the elderly or sick from the local herbivore populations, natural predators. Maintaining natural balance, we can coexist with them, Myron told the council, as long as we respect their territory and they respect ours, and if they don't, Marcus asked, then we defend our families, but let's not start a war. We don't need to fight. It was the right call. The creatures never attacked the settlement. Occasionally colonists would spot them in the distance, watching with golden eyes, but they kept their distance, a truce of mutual respect. Life found its rhythm. Crops grew, children learned and played. Adults built and planned. New beginning was becoming a true home, but Mayer never let his guard down completely. He kept weapons cached in hidden locations, maintained the orbital sensors, drilled everyone on evacuation procedures. Monthly, some complained it was paranoid, most understood it was necessary. She slipped the tags into her pocket and took his hand. Come on. Nichelet made dinner, and she says if we're late, she's eating our share. They went inside together into the warm light of their home and closed the door on the past. The galaxy was still dangerous. Helix dynamics was still out there. Trouble would probably find them eventually, but for now, in this moment, they had peace. They had each other. They had a family. My built their new house with his own hands, this time using local materials, blue wood from the strange trees, stone from the mountains, and clay from the riverbank. It was smaller than the house on Haven's edge, but stronger. He made sure every window had shutters that could be sealed. Every door had multiple locks, just in case. Normasa helped learning skills she'd need to survive, how to build, how to hunt with a bow since blasters could be tracked, how to read the stars without instruments, how to heal wounds with local plants that Nichelet identified and cataloged. She was growing up fast, too fast, but Mayan couldn't stop it. He could only prepare her for whatever came next. The colony thrived in ways Haven's Edge never had. Without the restrictions of official government, they created their own rules. Everyone worked, everyone contributed, and everyone looked out for each other's children. Norma's was especially loved, not despite what she was, but because of what she'd done. She'd saved them all on Haven's Edge. They didn't forget. Emma's family settled nearby, and the two girls remained inseparable. They explored the forest together, discovering new plants and animals. The planet's wildlife was mostly harmless, small creatures with blue fur that chittered and ran from humans, nothing like the predators on XK-99. This world was gentle, as if it welcomed them one afternoon, nearly a year after. Arriving on New Beginning, Myron was working on expanding the house when Carl approached. The big man had changed. Since Haven's edge had become quieter, more thoughtful. He'd apologized to Myron months ago for siding with Marielle, and they'd slowly rebuilt trust. "Captain, we've got a problem," Myron said. Down his tools. "What kind of problem?" Iher was doing a sweep with the long-range scanner. He picked up a ship in orbit, small single-pilot craft. "It's been there for 6 hours just watching." Myron's blood ran cold. "Any identification?" "None, but it's not moving on, just sitting there scanning the surface. They'd been found after all this time, after all their precautions. Someone had tracked them down." Myron gathered Normasa and Nishalit, and they went to the communication center, a small building in the center of the settlement cluster. Ehor showed them the scanner readings. "It's definitely scanning. Focus sweeps on our area. They know we're here. Can we contact them?" Myron clears throat, asked. "I can try. But Captain, if it's Helix Dynamics, we need to know who we're dealing with." Ihor opened a channel. "Unidentified vessel. This is New Beginning Colony. State your business or move along." Static crackled, then a voice, male. "Young New Beginning, is that what you're calling it? Bit optimistic, don't you think? Who are you?" "Someone who's been looking for you for a long time. Captain Myron, or should I call you by your new name, John Mercer?" "No, that doesn't suit you. You'll always be Myron." To me, the voice was familiar, but Myron couldn't place it. "What do you want to talk?" "Just talk. I'm not here to hurt anyone. In fact, I'm here to help." "We don't need help. You will. Helix Dynamics knows you're in this sector. They're sending a fleet. 3 ships, heavily armed, with orders to retrieve the subject by any means necessary. They'll be here in 2 weeks. Norm grabbed Myron's arm. "Is it true? Are they really coming? Why would you tell us this?" Myron demanded. "Because I don't work for Helix Dynamics anymore. I quit, or they fired me, depending on who you ask. Doesn't matter. What matters is I have information you need, and you have something I need." "And what's that?" "Place to land. I'm running out of fuel, and there's nowhere else to go within range. You let me down. Hear me out, and I'll tell you everything I know about what's coming. Fair trade." Mayan looked at the others. Nishalit shook her head. Carl fingered his rifle. Ehor looked uncertain, but Mayan remembered being desperate, remembered needing someone to take a chance on him. "You've got one shot at this. You try anything and we'll kill you. Understood?" "Understood." Transmitting landing coordinates now. The ship descended an hour later. Small scout craft that had seen better days. It touched down in the clearing they used as a landing field, and the pilot emerged with his hands raised. He was young, maybe 20, with red hair and the kind of lean build that came from not eating enough. He looked tired and scared and honest. "Name's Omar," he said. "I used to work security for Helix Dynamics, low-level stuff, monitoring communications, tracking potential leads. That's how I found you. I was supposed to report your location, collect my bonus, and get promoted, but..." He looked at Normasa, who stood behind Myron. "I did some research, found out what they wanted her for, what they planned to do, and I couldn't. I just couldn't." "So you're a traitor to your company?" Carl said. "I'm a traitor to people who want to cut open a kid. If that makes me the bad guy, I'll live with it." Omar lowered his hand slowly. Look, I know you don't trust me. I wouldn't either, but everything I said is true. Helix Dynamics is coming. They've got 3 warships, 24 soldiers, and authorization to use lethal force if necessary. They're done playing nice. 2 weeks, Myron said. That's not much time. No, it's not, but I can help you prepare. I know their tactics, their equipment, their protocols. I can give you an advantage. Nishalit stepped forward. And what do you want in return? Omar looked at the settlement, at the houses and farms, and the people starting to gather. A home. That's all, just a place where I don't have to be afraid anymore. Same thing you're all looking for. I studied him for a long moment. The kid looked sincere, but looks could be deceiving. Then again, they didn't have time to be suspicious. If what Omar said was true, they needed every advantage they could get. All right, you can stay, but you're under watch until we verify your information, and if you try anything, you'll kill me. I got it. Over the next 2 weeks, Omar proved his worth. He showed them how to jam Helix Dynamics scanners, how to create false heat signatures to confuse targeting systems, how to set traps using improvised explosives. The colonists worked day and night preparing for war. I took Omar aside one evening. Why'd you really do it? Risk everything for people you don't know? Omar was quiet for a moment. My sister, she was different, like Normasa, not genetically enhanced, just born wrong. The doctor said she needed constant medical care, and my family couldn't afford it. Corporation offered to help, said they'd pay for everything. They just wanted to run some tests. My parents agreed. He swallowed hard. She died in their facility. They said it was complications from her condition, but I saw the reports. They pushed too hard, tried experimental treatments without consent. She was 8 years old. I'm sorry, I can't save my sister, but maybe I can save Normasa. Maybe that counts for something. It counts for a lot. On the 13th day, the fleet arrived. 3 ships, just like Omar said, dropping out of hyperspace in perfect formation. They didn't bother hiding their approach. They knew where the colony was. They knew the colonists couldn't run. This was an ending one way or another. Mayan gathered everyone in the central square. Nearly 200 people, colonists who'd left everything behind for a chance at peace. Now they had to fight for it. You all know why you're here, he said. We've built something good on this planet, something worth protecting, and there are people in orbit who want to take that away. They want to take our children, our freedom, our future. Are we going to let them? The answer came as a roar. No, they would not let them. Colonists scattered to their positions. Hunters took to the hills with their bows. Farmers manned improvised barricades. Everyone who could hold a weapon did. It wasn't much against trained soldiers with advanced armor and weapons, but it was something. The Helix Dynamic ships landed in the valley, disgorging soldiers like ants from a kick nest. 50 men and women in black armor, moving with military precision. They fanned out, securing the perimeter, setting up a command post. Their leader, a woman with gray hair and cold eyes, activated a loudspeaker. This is Commander Loring of Helix Dynamics. We have legal claim to the subject. Designated Sample 47. Surrender her immediately, and you will not be harmed. Resist, and you will be subdued by force. You have 5 minutes to comply. 5 minutes. Mayan looked at Normasa, who stood beside him with Emma. The two Girls held hands, neither crying, both brave in the face of impossible odds. Around them, colonists checked their weapons, said goodbye to loved ones, prepared for a fight they'd probably lose. "We're not giving her up," Sarah said. She'd been elected leader of the new colony, and she stood tall despite her fear. "No matter what happens, no matter what," others echoed. The 5 minutes passed. Commander Loring's voice came again, harder now. "Your time is up. Soldiers, move in, subdue all resistance, retrieve the target." The soldiers advanced. Colonists rose from cover and fought back with everything they had. Arrows flew from the hills, most bouncing off armor, but some finding gaps. Improvised explosives detonated, creating confusion, but it wasn't enough. The soldiers had stun weapons that dropped colonists in seconds. They had armor that turned aside most attacks. They had training and discipline. The colonists had courage, but courage wasn't always enough. My fought alongside them, his old blaster spitting fire until it overheated and died. He grabbed a knife, one of the simple weapons they'd forged from local metal, and went hand to hand with a soldier twice his size. He didn't win. The soldier knocked him down, and Myron tasted blood through blurred vision. He saw Normasa being surrounded. She unleashed another bioelectric pulse, and 3 soldiers went down, but there were too many. They kept coming, kept closing in. Emma tried to help, throwing rocks, screaming, but a soldier grabbed her and tossed her aside like trash. Normasa knelt in the dirt, exhausted from using her powers. The soldiers had learned from last time. They wore insulated gloves now. Her electricity couldn't stop them. She looked at Mayan, and there were tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she mouthed. "No, not like this. After everything they'd been through, everything they'd survived, it couldn't end like this." Mayan tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't work. The soldier had hit him harder than he thought. Then Omar appeared, running from the communication center with something in his hands. "Detonator! Everyone down!" he screamed. "Everyone get down now." Myron didn't understand until the charges went off. Omar had mined the entire landing field, had placed explosives under the helix dynamic ships. When everyone was distracted with the fighting, the ships erupted in fire and twisted metal, taking dozens of soldiers with them. The explosion was deafening. The shock wave knocked everyone flat. When Myron's hearing returned, he heard screaming, groaning, the sound of dying ships and dying people. The helix dynamics forces were in disarray. Their soldiers scattered, their commander yelling orders that nobody could hear. The colonists rallied. They charged the broken enemy lines, fighting with renewed strength. Farmers used their tools as weapons. Traders swung cargo hooks. Even children fought, throwing stones and biting and refusing to let their home be taken. And in the middle of it all, Normasa stood up. She was glowing again, that violet light, brighter than before, but this time she wasn't attacking, she was shielding. The bioelectric field spread from her body like a dome, covering the colonists, protecting them from the soldiers. Weapons, stun blasts hit the field and fizzled out. The soldiers couldn't penetrate it. "Fall back, Commander!" Loring screamed. "All units fall back to secondary position." But there was no secondary position. Their ships were destroyed. Their soldiers were beaten. The colonists, these farmers and traders, and families who'd never wanted to fight, had won. The surviving helix Dynamics forces retreated into the hills, dragging their wounded commander. Lauren was among them, her face a mask of shock and disbelief. They'd expected an easy victory, they'd gotten a war. Norma's glow faded and she collapsed. Myron caught her before she hit the ground. Kid Normasa, stay with me, her eyes opened, unfocused. Did we win? Yeah, we won. Good, she smiled then. Passed out, and sometimes that was enough. Years would pass before trouble found them again. Normasa would grow into a remarkable young woman, strong and compassionate and brilliant. She'd become a doctor, using her unique abilities to heal others. She'd never forget her biological parents or the man who'd saved her from a lifetime of loneliness and exploitation. The aftermath of the battle was brutal. 12 colonists dead, 37 wounded. The settlement was damaged, crops burned, buildings destroyed, but they'd won. Against impossible odds, a group of farmers and refugees had defeated corporate military force. The surviving Helix Dynamic soldiers were rounded up and given a choice: stay and help, rebuild, or be set adrift in an escape pod with enough supplies to reach the nearest station. Most chose to stay. They'd seen what they were really fighting for, and they couldn't stomach it anymore. Commander Lauren chose the pod. As she was loaded in, she looked at Normasa with something like regret. You could have changed everything. Advanced medicine, extended lifespans. We could have saved millions by cutting me open. Normasa asked quietly, by treating me like a thing instead of a person. Sometimes progress requires sacrifice. Then let it require yours. Normasa turned away. Goodbye, Commander. Pod launched and they never saw Commander Lauren again, but they heard months later that she'd been fired from Helix Dynamics, that the company had disavowed the entire operation, that they'd abandoned their search for Sample 47 and moved on to other projects. Cost had been too high, the scandal too. Norma's was free, truly finally free. The colony rebuilt. Omar proved himself a capable builder and engineer, designing new structures that could withstand attack. He and Carl became friends, working side by side to fortify new beginning. Ehor married one of the colonist women and had a baby girl who they named Hope. Nishalit opened a medical clinic and trained others in her skills, creating a network of healers. And Myron watched his daughter grow, watched her learn and change and become someone he was proud to know. She kept her parents' identification tags, but she didn't need them anymore. She'd found new parents, a new family, a new life. On Normasa's 15th birthday, Myron took her to the top of the mountain, overlooking the settlement. From there, they could see the entire valley, the houses and farms, the river winding through it all like a silver thread. Ships came and went from the landing field, bringing traders and travelers who'd heard about the colony that fought off a corporation. New Beginning had become a symbol, a place where people could truly start over. What do you think? Myron asked. Was it worth it? All the running, all the fighting. Norma's leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. She was almost as tall as him now. Every second I have friends here, people who care about me, a place I belong. She pulled out the identification tags, looking at them in the sunlight. My parents would be happy. I think that I found someone who loves me as much as they did. I do love you, kid, more than I thought possible. I know, and I love you too, Dad. It was the first time she'd called him that. Dad, not Myron, not Captain, but Dad. and hearing it felt like coming home. After a lifetime of wandering, they sat together on that mountain as the sun set, painting the sky in colors that didn't exist on Earth or any other human world. Two survivors who'd found each other in the darkness and built something beautiful together. Below them, the colony thrived. Children played in the streets, including Emma and her little sister who'd been born on New Beginning. Farmers worked there. Field traders haggled over prices. Normal life, the kind most people took for granted, but which had cost this community everything to achieve. Do you think they'll come back? Normasa asked. Helix Dynamics or someone else? Maybe. Probably. There will always be people who see you as a commodity instead of a person. Myron put his arm around her shoulders. But they'll have to go through me, through all of us, and we've proven we're pretty hard to go through. She laughed, and it was the sound of joy, of freedom, of Clear's throat. A girl who'd spent 3 years alone in the dark and had finally found the light. I'm not afraid anymore. Whatever comes, we'll face it together, Mayan agreed. They watched the stars come out. Those same stars that had witnessed so much pain and loss and struggle, but they had also witnessed something else. Love, family, the unbreakable bond between a man who'd lost everything and a girl who'd been abandoned by fate. They'd found each other in the ruins, and they'd built something that couldn't be destroyed by any corporation or government or force in the galaxy. Emma climbed the mountain to join them. Breathless and excited, Normasa, you have to come see. Omar built a greenhouse and he says we can grow earth fruits, real strawberries. Normasa stood, pulling Myron up with her. Come on, Dad. Let's go see strawberries. They walked down the mountain together, the three of them, toward the lights of home. Behind them, the stars wheeled in their eternal dance. Before them, a future full of possibility. And in that moment, on a planet so far from everything that it barely existed on any map, 3 people who'd been lost found exactly what they'd been searching for. Not just safety, not just freedom, but belonging. Family, home. But that's a story for another time. For now, on a colony world, at the edge of known space, a man and a girl and a woman who'd all lost their families found something precious. They found each other. They found home. And in the end, home wasn't a place. It was the people who chose to stand beside you no matter what storms came. It was the love that survived loss and fear and danger. It was the simple act of choosing every day to be family. The safe harbor sat in its hangar, engines cold, ready for whatever adventures might come. But Mayan wasn't in any hurry to leave. He had everything he needed right here, a daughter who called his name with love, a friend who'd become family, a house with a garden and a view, a community that accepted them. Without question, he'd spent so many years running from his grief, from his failures, from himself. But a little girl with violet skin and enormous trust had given him something to run toward. Instead, she'd given him purpose. She'd given him redemption. She'd given him the chance to be the father he'd always wanted to be, and he'd spend the rest of his life making sure she knew she was loved, she was safe, and she was home. On Haven's edge, under a sky full of stars, 3 people who'd been lost found their way. And though the universe was vast and often cruel, in that small house on the edge of the forest, there was warmth and laughter and belonging. It was enough. It was everything